Hello and welcome back to another University Deep Dive. Today we are looking at the Baker program, the master program at Cornell University with student Ines Andrade. Ines, thanks for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to look at the program here, and to get us started, we'll turn it over to Spencer.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And Ines, nice to see you. We're going to be speaking about, as Sam mentioned, the Baker program in real estate at Cornell. It's the graduate real estate program. Um, Full disclosure, I am an alum of the program. I'm a graduate of the program. So I'm a tad biased. Nevertheless, we'll do our best, Ines, right, to give a fair look at what it means to study real estate as a graduate student in the Baker program at Cornell, and talk about your experience. So maybe let's start there. When you think now at what it means to be a Baker student at Cornell, what does that mean for you?
I think for me, it really means that I am in a top program in our field, surrounded by a lot of very brilliant classmates who all want to do similar things to what I want to do. And that's a very beautiful thing. I think when you participate in an MBA program, for example, you get a lot of students who all have different avenues and different industries they want to go into. But it is pretty great to talk about cap rates with all of our classmates on our free time. And I think that's a very unique aspect of a master's in real estate program.
Yeah, I love that. That was my experience as well. So let's get into a kind of nuts and bolts of studying real estate as a graduate student at Cornell. What's the program's length? What's required to graduate? What are kind of some typical courses that one goes through in those four semesters and so forth?
Sure. So the program is 2 years, and part of the requirements for graduation is a 10-week internship. Rather than in a master's of science program where you would typically do a thesis, the program requires a 10-week internship in between. So the first 3 semesters are all core courses, and you're required to take 62 hours to graduate. So the first semester is principles of real estate, communications in real estate, managerial finance, urban economics, and a couple other very core courses. And then you take a deeper dive into those your second semester. So, for example, one of the courses that we had in a two-part series in the fall semester was creating the built environment and innovations in strategy in commercial real estate. And that translates into the spring semester, in which you take a residential development course, for example. And then you take finance and investments and real estate financial modeling. And so everything within the program kind of builds on itself, and you really start off with the same base as everybody else. You can test out of some courses, but ideally you'd go through all the courses from the first 3 semesters along with all your classmates. And then your last semester is where you really get to specialize. So there are a couple of different concentrations. The most popular ones are the finance and investments one, which a lot of students do that if they're hoping to go into private equity or institutional investment, et cetera. And then the development concentration is the other popular one. And you can essentially form your own concentration as well. If you find that you, for example, would like to do prop tech in the future, you can build your own concentration and get it approved through the program. And so you take your first 3 semesters are all the same classes as everybody else, and then that leaves you with one final semester to pick whatever classes you want to do that can count towards your concentration. And oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, keep going.
I was going to say where I think that can be a great experience too is, for example, there's a VBA course within the hotel school that I want to take, and I can count that towards my finance and investments concentration, because to be good at financial modeling, that can be really essential as well. Or you can take a hospitality finance class, for example, and you can kind of just build around what you think is going to help you the most within that concentration and pick your courses.
So at what point in your journey do you select that concentration, and what concentration options are there? And talk to us a little bit about what that process is of choosing a concentration.
Sure. So ideally, the program officially says, pick your concentration in your second year after your first internship. But I think a lot of us came in with our concentrations in mind. And I tailored my education towards that concentration from the very beginning. But the nice thing about it too is you can definitely change your mind, and some of the electives you might have taken along the way can definitely count towards a new concentration. So I think that the concentrations that we have are the finance and investments. You can do development, market analysis and research, uh, independent concentration, and I want to say those are the four core concentrations, and then you're free to do, whatever it is you want to do. If you want to pick a different concentration, you just have to get it approved.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned call it the custom concentration. I've heard
Mhm.
over the years a whole variety of interesting ones. International hospitality. I remember there's an individual that graduated with me who did that. Really wanted to end up in the Middle East, working in large resorts and developing large resorts. So it provides quite a bit of flexibility. You know what's
Mhm.
interesting? Most of the graduate real estate programs, so the MREDs and the
Mhm.
MS Reds and the MPR
Mhm.
MPRESs that we run into are maybe 1 year or 2.5 semesters
Mhm.
long. The Baker program's a full 2 years, more akin to, say, an MBA.
Mhm.
Why would one study 2 years with an internship at, say, a Baker program rather than an MBA with a concentration in real estate? What's kind of the reasoning for that?
I think that everybody has, their own reasons for picking this program, but for me specifically, I knew that I wanted to do real estate. And so I didn't want to spend 2 years at an MBA program taking, supply chain management and accounting and marketing. And not that there's anything, wrong with that trajectory, but I just know what I want to do. And so I wanted to take 2 full years worth of exclusively real estate classes to become a master of real estate rather than a master of business administration.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Talk to us a little bit about what goes on outside of the classroom. I know we're in a COVID time and things are changing. Nevertheless, um, you've got a heavy course load, but what can one expect to do outside of the classroom to enrich their real estate education?
Sure. So I think the curriculum is pretty rigorous, which has its ups and downs, but I would say your classes directly apply to everything you're hoping to do outside. So a lot of us do a lot of case competitions. I myself am involved in several of our clubs or graduate organizations. So we've got the association or the associate real estate council, which is the student version of the Cornell Real Estate Council, the alumni group, and then the Association of Cornell Women in Real Estate, Baker Student Organization, etc. A lot of us occupy our time with a lot of those organizations. Some of us are also part of the UT Austin case competition team, and that out in and of itself is pretty intense, and it's a couple hours a week of just practicing and reviewing real life cases and working through why does this work, what doesn't it work, what are some red flags, or maybe what are some risks with this deal and how do you mitigate those risks. And there's a lot of case competitions similar to that that will give you the most real life experience to what looking at a deal actually is like.
Yeah. Now you mentioned alumni. Talk to us about the strength and depth of the Cornell real estate alumni. What sort of support you as a Baker student get from the alumni, and any other experiences that you've had with those who have graduated from Cornell.
I find that Cornelians are huge fans of other Cornelians. There's definitely a deeper sense of school spirit at a school like Cornell. And I think the affiliation with the hotel school helps quite a bit. Hoteliers are huge fans of other hoteliers. And that really helps the students in the Baker program because we are technically housed under three different programs. So we're technically under the SC Johnson College of Business, which is also the home for the School of Hotel Administration, City and Regional Planning, and a couple others. So that really does help. When I connect with somebody else that's an alum in the industry, a lot of them are hotel school alums, and they are always interested and they always want to talk to hotel students or real estate students. And so that has helped quite a bit. And I know last year was a little bit of an off year just because of COVID. But the alumni group, so the Cornell Real Estate Council, has a mentorship program, and so we're all paired up with alums that have similar career paths to what we're interested in, and they help connect us within the industry, connect with other students. and recent graduates as well to help everybody find the jobs they want to find, connect with the network they want to connect with.
Yeah, that's great. Let's talk about jobs and outcomes. Um, you mentioned some concentrations, finance and investment, and ultimately that's about landing a job post graduation. What sorts of roles are Baker students going into post graduation? Where are they typically ending up geographically? Um, and what are the general prospects? Call it the probability of having a job 6 months after graduation in a program like the Baker program.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that the previous classes really influence the incoming classes. So, for example, we have years where there's a huge group of students who are all interested in development. And so you'll kind of see the incoming class who all have talked to these students start to develop a deeper interest in development as well. And so we've seen that across several different classes. But I think everybody can generally be split into either finance and investments or development and then different subsectors of that. And it's really all working. When you're in a graduate program, the jobs are not as readily available as they are for undergraduate programs. And part of the reason is because most of us have real experience. And so we're looking for more of associate roles. And most companies, and especially the bigger companies, I'm finding out, don't really have a program. So, for example, Prudential has an investment analyst program. So they know every single year they're going to hire a certain number of analysts. The same isn't true for associates. So part of this whole process is coming here, networking with each other and networking with alums and other people in the industry to really figure out what it is that you want to do, narrow it down, and then continue networking until all of these companies start to have some roles open up at the associate or maybe even a higher level than an associate. And so that's what we've all come to find. But that said, people end up at a lot of different types of companies. There's always a group that wants to do private equity and wants to go into the larger shops, and there's other groups who want to do, for example, development and have their own different markets that they want to work in. And so I would say we're pretty far spread out across the country as an alumni group. So there's a huge group of bakers in New York. There's actually a pretty sizable group in Dallas. There's a whole bunch in California and LA or the Bay Area. There's a good group in Chicago as well. I think you end up touching all of the major markets. But for example, in our most recent class, we had two students go to a development shop together in Boca Raton, Florida, which I think is pretty unique.
Very
Um,
cool.
but yeah, so it's tough to generalize because we're all here for the same thing ultimately, but everybody has different career paths that they want to explore. So you have a good mix of people who end up at big companies and a good mix who end up at small companies. And every year you have a couple of students too who come from a real estate family and are here to really get the best education they can get so that they can go back and run their family's real estate company, for example. So I think that's pretty
Yeah,
unique.
yeah, that's great. I find it interesting. So Cornell is located in a city in upstate New York called Ithaca, New York. Small city on a beautiful lake. Just gorgeous atmosphere, but certainly isolated, uh, relatively isolated from the rest of the world. And yet, real estate students coming out of Cornell end up everywhere.
Mhm.
And while there is a larger concentration, say in New York City, given its proximity, they really do end up all over the country. And I always found that was one of the big differentiators for me when I was
Mhm.
choosing a school. I like the idea that I could come out of a small place, small, intimate, tight knit group, and end up kind of any city I wanted. Talk to us a little bit about. I see a snowboard behind you. Talk to us a little about what it's like living in Cornell or in Ithaca, going to school in a cold, isolated city in upstate New York. Beautiful nonetheless, but what's that like? What are the pros and what are some of the drawbacks of Ithaca?
Sure. I went to the University of Illinois for undergrad, so I was already pretty familiar with the college town experience. And I'll say it's very unique. I toured a lot of other campuses, and I have a sister who went to school in Chicago, and her experience was very different from mine. When you're here, everybody's on the same boat as you. You're all working through classes. You're all kind of in college. Whereas when you live in a bigger city, everything is a lot more spread out. So you come here to Cornell and you go to the coffee shop down the street from campus and you run into people. In a bigger city, that's not necessarily the case. So I think that you just build a deeper sense of camaraderie when you're all here, you're all isolated, you all hang out with each other. And Ithaca is honestly a beautiful place to do that as well. There's a million hiking trails around here, waterfalls everywhere. I'm excited. The leaves are about to start turning, and it's
Mhm.
just a beautiful place to be in the fall. And so we've got the lake. There's a lot of outdoor activities you can do, and in the winter we all go snowboarding and skiing at Greek Peak, which is 20 minutes from here. And I don't think that there are a lot of places in this country where you can really do that, where you can have great summer activities and then great winter activities as well. So the only drawback that I really have seen or experienced is that a lot of students, for example, at NYU, they do a part-time internship while they're finishing up school. And I think that our curriculum would allow for that if you take an elective every semester of your core, for example. You could take only a couple of classes your last semester and then do a part-time internship. But because we're so far from New York City, not a lot of people do that. But I do think that COVID has really changed that dynamic. Everybody's been working remotely for a while. And so I think we're going to start to see a lot more of remote internships happening as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment, and that used to be kind of the only drawback to, in my view, of a place like Cornell. Which, by the way, I prefer a college town, small, tight knit
Mhm.
experience. It's, a chance to really focus. But now where you could also do remote
Yeah.
internships is quite attractive. We're low on time, and Ines, I want to make sure to ask this last question of you. So you're in your second year now at Cornell. You've had some incredible experiences. You're part of leadership and a variety of activities on campus. As you look back to your experience thus far as a Baker student at Cornell, is there one experience you can point us to that had an outsized impact on your trajectory thus far?
I would say the people. My classmates are remarkable human beings in general, and they're very sharp, very bright. And when you get a good group of students all together who have similar interests, who come from a variety of different backgrounds, I think that's where the majority of the real learning really takes place. Academics are one thing, and we're obviously learning a lot in our classes. But if I can turn to a classmate and say, "Hey, you worked in construction. Tell me a little bit more about how this works in real life," that's where I feel like I've done the most growing, and just being surrounded by all these people that I have a lot to learn from is a pretty remarkable thing. So if I could pinpoint one thing, and my favorite thing about this whole program has been my classmates.
That's great. Well, thanks, Ines. And Sam, back to you.
Thank you so much, Ines, for being with us here today. This has been fantastic. And to the viewer, thank you for sharing many of your time with us. And best of luck to you and to your adventure in commercial real estate.